are here in person in East Peoria with the Illinois Federation of Republican Women. Everybody say hello. Democrats will tell you that the Republican Party is the party of old white men, and I look around this room and I say that is absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, as I've been doing trainings for the Republican Party across the country, I can tell you that at least for the last 6 years, in every training that I've done in 40 plus states around this country, there have been more women than men. In almost every single training, actually every training that I've done has been more women than men. What they try to say about our party is absolutely not true, and you all are a big reason for that. So thank you for what you do. We're going to record a special episode of the Smoke-Filled Room from right here as part of their annual convention. We're really grateful for them to have us come out. I want to introduce the wonderful guests that we had with us today. And if we're talking IFRW, I'm going to start with Diane Jordan, who's been on our podcast before. We're really glad to have her with us today. Diane, you wear a lot of hats, but the most important one you wear, at least to this room, is Vice President of IFRW, in addition to a number of other things. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me again.
We also have with us Corey Allen, who is Vice Chairman of the Tazewell County Republican Party and a Navy veteran. So thank you for your service and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
I will say they applauded you and not Diane. I don't know what's going to do you to that.
Let's try it again.
So, I'm really glad to introduce this next guest that we have with us because she made Michael and I look smart. So when everybody else was saying that the Mike Marin seat was gone, that Brandun Schweizer was never going to win, Michael and I went publicly and said that that race was one of our locks, that Schweizer was going to win, and that was partially because we knew Chelsie is really dang good at what she does, and she made sure we run that seat in addition to some others. So Chelsie, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And if you've never watched our Smoke Room before, you know Michael Butler. He is the mayor of Butlerville, which is north of Southern Illinois. And as one of our regular guests, he's a political expert from Core Strategies, our company. Michael, glad to have you.
Good to be here. Good to see you guys.
One thing that drives me nuts is in most of this state, when I go around, I own the company, Michael works for me, and yet everyone knows Michael. They're like, oh, do you work with Michael? Or yeah, I work with my friends. I just gave up fighting that at a certain point. So I think there's a lot of people out there who still think that he signs my pension. So.
Yeah, that may change one day. We'll see.
All right, let's start with this. Just an overall discussion of what happened in election day. We know nationally what happened. Obviously, there will be an upgrade in the White House coming up soon here in a couple months. We know that the Republicans took control of the U.S. Senate and retained control of the U.S. House. Nationally, this was a great election for Republicans. Here in Illinois, while the doomsayers were saying that Republicans were going to get completely wiped out in Illinois, we held solid. We didn't lose seats thanks to Schweizer and a couple other excellent candidates that we had who held their ground. We also didn't pick up seats, and some people like me who love to win, I didn't love that, and I will say I did speak out about how we got to fight more and we win some seats. But the good news is, even though everyone predicted, or at least many people predicted, that Republicans were dead in Illinois, we certainly proved that that isn't the case. So I'm going to pass it to each of our guests. And why don't we start with Chelsie, since she's still been counting votes for a week and a half down in Champaign County. What did we see happen in this election, and what does that mean for those of us in the room?
Thank you. So what we saw in this election is that Republicans need to change up our messaging. You and I were talking about it earlier. We are very intellectual. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, let's talk tax policy, I'm like, awesome. I read 3 books. And nobody actually comes up and says, hey, let's talk tax policy. They're like, did you know that eggs are expensive? A thing of strawberries is $8. That still blows my mind. Okay, my kids love strawberries. We're going to go broke buying fruit in Biden's economy. But we learned that we always stick to the policies, but most people don't vote by that. They vote by emotion. They vote by what they're hearing out there in the media. And so we have to learn to fight better and to bring our message to them that's going to resonate with them and make them realize that they need to come over to our side and that we are not the big bad boogeymen who hate women, that we actually uplift women, that we are the party that loves women and respects them, specifically in sports. So we saw that, and we also saw that Democrats really did do a really good job of gerrymandering the districts. Trump went up in our state, and not a single Democrat lost a seat when it comes to the House or the Senate. So we now know that, okay, we're going to have to work extra hard. We're going to have to be reaching out to those communities that we haven't been reaching out to before with a better message that resonates with them. And we're going to have to do that groundwork. And I think a lot of us are ready to start doing that.
Well, the good news is you look at the underlying data, there are clearly opportunities. When we look at, that's why I own a polling company. Every poll that we do, when we break it down by demographics, there's always one demographic every single time, and it's been this way for over 4 years now, that shows tremendous willingness to move to the conservative position or the Republican Party. Every time, it's Hispanics. They absolutely are done with the Democratic Party. The progressives have left the Hispanic community. The problem is Republicans don't tend to put in that effort to go speak to what is becoming one of the largest voting blocs in the entire country.
Well, I mean, just looking at Trump's numbers with Hispanics this past election, it was 45% of Hispanic men, I believe. And I used to work for this company called Empower Illinois. We were part of the Invest in Kids Act, tax credit scholarships that Democrats killed in this previous budget. But we won't talk about that. But
For working families.
For working families and minorities.
Yep.
Yeah. But we would bring parents down, a lot of parents from the Chicagoland area, and a lot of our schools were Catholic schools, and Hispanics are, generally speaking, Catholic. And we would show them around, and we would say, okay, here's your representative, here's your senator. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember I got petitions signed for them. I love them. And like, they want your child to lose their scholarship. They did not realize that everything that is of value to them, their principles, what they believe in, they were voting for people directly opposed to that, but they were voting for them because they had the Hispanic last name or they looked Hispanic. So that just shows that we have not gone into those communities that do have the traditional values that conservatives have and made them aware that we exist. There is another option that they can vote for us, and we will be there fighting for them and their values.
Yeah, listen, don't give away my tactic too quickly, because as a political operative, I've used that. I had the whitest woman on the planet who married a Hispanic man, so her last name was then Rodriguez. And I brought her into a whole bunch of Hispanic areas, like, hey, you can vote for her, she's a Rodriguez. So sometimes we use that on our side, too.
Yeah, it's my shit.
I feel like in this event, it's got to be ladies first. So Diana, what about you next? Your thoughts, your feelings from this last election?
Well, coming from Tazewell County, which is all red, it was a fantastic election for us. And I worked for Representative Bill Howder part-time, and Dennis Tipsword, Representative Tipsword also touches Tazewell County. And they had opponents, and they crushed them. And all of our Tazewell County is red still. So I'm excited about that. I just, Desi touches our county a little bit. And so we were really hoping for a win there. But we were glad that Rep. Howard Tipsburg came through wholeheartedly, strongly. And you are Tazewell County as well.
Sorry. I got Diane's taking my job from me. She's always this buddy. You're next.
Because he has a lot more of that kind of.
Go ahead. Go for it. Yeah. You're the boss here, not me.
Thanks for setting me up on this one. I think Chelsea's got it nailed. You know, there's a lot of opportunity out here that, you know, it's called low-hanging fruit. A few years back, I was talking about this because I came from Peoria, born and raised over there, so I understand a little bit more of the mixed politics. I was talking to somebody who didn't know how to get in and talk to the minorities, and they said, well, we don't know how. It's disrespectful to go in and say the wrong thing. Well, then I go and talk to my black friends, and I convey that to them, and they say, well, it's disrespectful not to try. And that's what we haven't done for a very long time, is actually try to go over and bring people to our side, because we expect them to either be all blue and then flip to all red, and that's not how it's going to work. You're going to have to meet them where they are. You know, Kathy was just talking about that. We got to find people who are hurting. You know, like you said, strawberries at $8 a carton. That is ridiculous. You know, if we can convey what we stand for as a principled Republican Party, they'll come over. They did it throughout the country. We're just not messaging correctly because the maps are gerrymandered so bad, you know, and that's where The solution starts in spring of 25 with the consolidators. We've got to get boots on the ground, get organized so that we can get the governor's mansion brought back over to our side so we can get those maps really squared away. Because again, when you look at the statewide data, Trump went up, yet we didn't lose any seats. So, it's there. We just got to find out low-hanging fruit, and it's the minorities. It's going into these groups that we don't know how to talk to. The youth. The Democrats have been dominating the youth for so long because, hey, come be whatever you want to be. There's no reins to it. Just vote for us. Well, then they have kids. Then they get jobs. They meet FICA, some of these things that come out of our paychecks. And they're like, wait a minute. And that's where we get our Republicans from. They turn 40. They have families. And they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I think we need to do a better job of getting into these small pockets of people and saying, come over, because the coalitions are there.
But so I live up in Cook County, and there's a significant population of Arab Americans up there, and we've been doing a lot of work with them over the last couple of years, simply because I made the mistake of thinking, well, they're liberal, they're left of center, they're not going to work with us. Then the first meeting I had with them several years ago blew me away. They said, yes, there's the Rashids and the Saids, and there's a couple other elected officials in Illinois who represent their community who are super progressive, but they actually all don't like them. The problem is they're the only ones they have to work with. Most Arab Americans are fairly moderate, and they aren't represented by the Rashids of the world, the Saids of the world who are super progressive, and so they're looking for some other path. But no Republicans ever come and speak to them. They have events. They hey, come out and speak. And no Republican wants to show up. Please, we're with you on your policies. Please come speak to us. They're begging Republicans to do so. And we hear these stories over and over. Our message, our issues, everything plays. We're just really bad at going and speaking to people and then communicating to them in an effective way. But the good news is we're right on policy. So the first step is good. But now we got to go out there and win. And even in a state that's gerrymandered, even in a blue state, we can win, but we got to be better. We got to make sure we spend the next 18 months getting better, getting out there and speaking to voters, because the wins are available if we go out there and don't get them. I want to pass it over to Michael to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points have been hit, over the course of the last few minutes. But, Trump got 2.4 million votes in the state of Illinois. That's a big deal. And that's thanks to a lot of the work that people in this room have done to get that message out and remind people. You got to get out and vote, whether it's early, by mail, on election day, get that ballot in. And there's a lot of people out there that obviously support our values and want people like President Trump to be in office. So it's up to us in each of our respective counties to identify those people and make sure that they vote in that November election, or in the municipal election that's coming up, and the November next midterm election, when we're trying to flip statewide offices. Because Trump got more votes statewide in 2024 than Pritzker got in 2022, right? Trump got 2.4 million votes. So we need to be identifying those people and making sure that they get out and vote in this next election. And
Well, let's talk about some of the key races, and I'll stick with you. I know one of the big races that mattered within all of Illinois was happening down in your region with Schmidt holding on to that seat. And I think it's a really good example to just any room, but especially a room like this, of how grassroots activity and working your district and talking to voters and caring about their issues and not nationalizing or even making it a state race, but hey, what can I do to make your life better? That worked really dang well for Kevin Schmidt. He shocked people 2 years ago when he won. He shocked him again when he won pretty significantly yet again. Talk about what he did that made such an impact.
I think some of the things that made the most impact is constituent services. He had very good constituent services. He actually put his district office in Cahokia Heights, which is predominantly African American community. His district is very diverse. The western side is very heavy minority, where the eastern side is very heavy white people. I live in Kevin's district. I live in O'Fallon. But he made a concerted effort to reach out to those communities that, historically hadn't voted Republican and probably weren't going to vote for him. But he wanted to make sure that he was aware that, hey, I'm fighting for you too. I'm fighting for you in Springfield. And if they had any problems with any government agency, he was making sure that those needs got addressed. So I think that was a major factor in his victory. And then also ground game. We knocked 33,000 doors between the May 1st and Election Day. and we knocked every precinct. Some of the precincts we knocked 2-3 times. So we really had people out, pounding the pavement, and spreading that message. Latoya Greenwood and her and House Democrats, they spent over $2 million on that race, but we beat them by 4%. It was 1,845 votes. So that's a pretty healthy margin there. Obviously, we're looking to continue improving on that, drive that number up. That way we can go after the Senate seat in the future. But he did get 383 votes out of East St. Louis. It was about 6%, which is very high for East St. Louis. Usually we're lucky to get 100. And he got 1,036 votes out of Cahokia Heights. So that was, that's 1,400 votes right there, and he won by 1,845. So it's about getting out, talking to people, making those connections, and making sure that they know that it doesn't matter what race you are, what zip code you live in. We as Republicans are going to Springfield and fighting for you.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to end that comment. Well done.
Yeah.
Speaking of other key races, let's pass it over to Chelsie. Obviously, the Schweizer race has been a big deal. If Schmidt was the number one target for Democrats, Schweizer was 2 or 3 that they really wanted to take him out and take that seat, and it didn't happen. So tell us, what were some of those keys to victory for you guys?
So like Michael was saying, it was a lot of the ground game. We actually knocked 36,000 doors.
He's not saying it's bigger, but it's bigger.
And so Brandun didn't have, Schmidt had been in office for 2 years prior. Brandun, I ran Brandun's campaign. He was appointed in January. His opponent, Clem, had decided to actually start running in October of 2023. So October 23, Clem decides that he's going to run. Brandun gets appointed in January, and that's in the middle of session. He can't be campaigning because he's learning how to be a legislator. So then finally they get out of session. It's like, oh, we have to start campaigning. So Brandun literally was going to every event that we could find in the district, specifically trying to get him into Champaign more where he would not have the name recognition. If he was not at an event, he was out there door knocking. At night when it started to get dark, he was actually calling people. Our job was to get his name known to as many people in that district as possible. The one area that I think we definitely messed up in, because I want to always think what can we do better in the future, is we ran away from the abortion issue. We looked at the polling, we saw that it was like the 3rd or 4th issue, and we're like, okay, people don't care about that. Strawberries are expensive. And what was their one attack on Brandun, because they didn't have any? That he hates women, which when Brandun was on your podcast, he joked his life was literally controlled by women. So we should have come out with a stronger message on that, and we should not have shied away from him being a standard Republican who is pro-life with exceptions. And let people know, and you know what, that's what he is, but in Illinois, at this moment, that's not an issue. You don't have to worry about that if you are super duper concerned about abortion. So really, it comes down to we have to be making those voter contacts. You have to be reaching out to the moderates on both sides and the swings. And that's what I think we hit some precincts 4 or 5 times.
Well, I think the big message to me is we all know Mike Madigan, right? Everyone knows that name. And maybe say inmate Mike Madigan and a little bit, the Honorable. But one of the things that he required of all of his incumbents in the House was that they didn't stop campaigning. What we do badly as Republicans sometimes, listen, we all want to get better, as Chelsie said, is we think of election season and then it's done. The problem is it's not done. Nationwide, when the Republican Party tends to close down our offices after Election Day, the Democratic Party keeps their field offices open all year, every year. When we think about election season, we tend to kind of pack it in a little bit. But guess what? Democrats are out there registering voters. They're still knocking on doors. They're still working. And as we have these incumbents like Schweizer and Schmidt and McLaughlin and Grant and some of these others, we've got to be out there talking to voters in the 18 months between elections so they're so rock solid that we don't have to spend money in those races so that we can sting it in, let's say, 91 or 97 or some of these others that we want to pick up. And so the work can't stop just because we're past Election Day. You have to take the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all right, that's fine. But Jan 1, we've got to get right back at it.
Yeah, and that's actually something Brandun and I have been discussing. I believe I was on November 7th. I texted him and was like, you ready to start campaigning again? And he was like, all in. But no, we have to be doing that because we live in the political world. We are the anomalies. Okay, not everybody likes to talk about politics. They try to get away from it. So we have to remember that the people that are going to be voting are not us. A lot of people didn't even realize that there was an election until like maybe 2 or 3 days beforehand. And you might be laughing, but that's true. So we have to be out there doing that and talking to people the entire time. And I want to emphasize that we need to be doing it smarter. Okay? It's always fun to go into the precincts that you know that you're well liked in. But we have to be looking at the data at this past election. Okay, what precincts, what percentage voted for Republicans, but of those who voted, how many of the registered Republicans or people who we think are Republicans stay home? Where can we be making the biggest gains? Like that right there is the low-hanging fruit. That person should have come out and voted. Why didn't they? And then we have to be looking at the demographics of the precincts and saying, okay, well, this is where I got my butt kicked. What can I be doing differently in that precinct to be picking up more votes? That way that difference is smaller the next time.
Another key thing is candidate recruitment. I want to talk to Corey and Diane here, and you guys can decide. Clearly, Diane will decide who gets to speak on this side, too. One of the things Republicans did really well in this cycle, a big improvement for previous cycles, was candidate recruitment. It's something we've been begging the party to get better at for a very long time. In this cycle, there was a significant improvement. A lot more focus went into it. And we had a lot of great candidates in what we call Tier 1 races, where this is the one where a lot of money is going to be spent. We also had a lot of good candidates in Tier 2 and Tier 3 races, where it's, hey, maybe, we don't know for sure yet, but maybe this will be a race in play. 91 was a great example of that, where it wasn't a Tier 1 race. It wasn't going to be, hey, we're going to spend millions right away. It was, maybe we'll be able to play here, maybe not. But the great news and the great thing I saw was that we found a really good candidate in 91 that I know you were really high on, even though it wasn't necessarily that Tier 1 race right away. And that's a huge sign of improvement for our party, is that we can keep getting better at recruiting good candidates, likable candidates, females, minorities, solid candidates with business backgrounds and community backgrounds. We're going to see a lot more success. And so I want to ask you guys to talk about 91, Desi Anderson. I know you were very high on the race, and we all love Desi. Talk about how it was a big deal that we got a good candidate in that race.
Of course. No, the 91's interesting because McLean County, we lost it. It went all blue. So Democrats were heavily invested over there. The benefit of having Desi Anderson is that she took on a heavy hitter the cycle before and Dave Kaler over in the 46. So she had some familiarity there. And I think that's something, Diane and I have talked about that before, is that it seemed like for cycles before this, we were looking at candidates as we raised them up on, the day after election, we shut everything down, they didn't win, and it's on to the next one. Where you look out across the state, Gabby Shanahan, she's a good example of this, that, maybe she didn't get there this time, but next time now she knows everything. That to me is the better candidates give us a better chance of continuity. Because, the maps get drawn and then you got to learn a cycle or two of what's there. And it takes a little bit. Scott Preston ran into 91st last time, lost similar margin, I think, 3-4 points, something like that. It's because those maps are gerrymandered. So what Desi has to do if she decides to take that race again is go in and find that low-hanging fruit. What do we learn? And that's where a lot of times in the military, that's one thing that we do very well is continuity, is that we learn from our mistakes, sometimes slower than others. But we got to do that here, is that, if we can figure out how to utilize those good candidates that are coming up, give them that data, give them the good people behind them so that they're not beholden to the money. That, to me, is what I saw with these candidates out there. The ones who were working hard, Kevin Schmidt, I look at that guy, you said it. Last cycle, he didn't have a chance, and he won. He didn't have a chance this cycle to maintain, and he won. And 4 points in Illinois, he won handedly, and he's pulling votes out of East St. Louis. There's a blueprint right there. McLean can be taken, the 91st, the way that it's drawn. We, as the political pundits, we're kind of invested. We live in this world. We have to do a better job of sussing out those data points, figuring out where are we weak at. We look at numbers and we get lost in them. How do you actually activate on them? And that's where I think raising better candidates that know how to be actionable from the moment they hit the ground running. I worked with Desi when she was getting ready for the 46. She was all in from the first moment. That's what we need. We need to get people who are motivated to actually make change for a productive purpose. We get too many people that I feel, and it may be a little bit northern part of Illinois, where people get in there because it's the cool thing to do, or because it's just another notch on their social belt, while strawberries are $8 a carton. I'm a single dad of 3 teenagers. I can tell you all about how much food costs right now. And it makes me angry. It really does.
Actually, I want to ask him how much does makeup cost. That's probably...
Fortunately, my daughter doesn't wear as much makeup.
We're all learning these things. Like, I just learned how expensive formula and diapers are. So we're all learning these things as life goes on.
Well, and that's what we have to do a better job of, is that the left takes and makes an emotional plea. We're going to take everything from you. No, we're not. We're going to give you back things. We're going to give you back your money. We're going to give you back your freedom. We're going to give you back that ability to have hope. By a show of hands, we can't see it on the screen. How many people had hope for the first time the day after the election? I woke up with energy because maybe we didn't get the gains here, but as a country, we got it right. That gives us kind of our imperative, especially from leadership.
And Corey, I want to just, to your point, I want to talk about 2 quick things and then pass it to Diane. Number one, we did some exit polling after the last election where things went really blue in Illinois. And one of the big things we learned in that exit polling, which it's up on our website, you're welcome to pour through, it's like 80 pages of data that we made freely available to the public. One of the things that blew my mind was we asked people, are you, people who had voted, who had just voted deep blue in Illinois, are you conservative, moderate, liberal? I would have expected in a deep blue state that just voted deep blue, liberal would have gotten first. No, moderate, overwhelmingly got first. What got second in a deep blue state? Not liberal, conservative. Liberal was third. People who self-identified right after voting deep blue in this state. It tells you there's a chance to win in this state. This is not a deep blue California where, by the way, some of our clients are Republicans and they're winning. But anyways, I digress. This isn't that kind of a place. This isn't Connecticut. This is a working class, middle class working families in this state. That's where we're making the decision. So there's hope, number one. Number two, you brought it up, that Democrats are very good at making things broader, more emotional issues. We go, it's taxes, or it's this one issue. You've mentioned already. You mentioned groceries. I brought up diapers and then I jokingly brought up makeup. Everything is more expensive. Democrats are good at saying, hey, listen, the entire world right now is more expensive. Healthcare, it's the number 3, number 4 issue for voters, and we as Republicans never talk about it, and yet that's an expense. Healthcare is incredibly expensive right now, and guess what happened? Last session, Democrats voted at least 5 times that I can count, probably more, to raise health insurance rates. Every time they vote for a sweetener within health insurance, our rates all go up. But when did Republicans talk about that? Democrats raised your health insurance rates, and yet no Republican campaign used them. Drove me crazy. There are issues beyond just taxes. Yes, we know Illinois is the second worst state in the country on taxes. We get it. But there are issues bigger than just that. It is the overall cost of living. It's eggs, it's milk, it's strawberries or chocolate-covered strawberries. Right? Everything is more expensive. And you know what? The Republican Party has a plan for this. By the way, last week, I'll stop with this and pass it to you. Last week, I didn't have time to talk about it on our podcast, but it came out that guess where the most expensive groceries are in all the Midwest? Illinois.
Yeah.
Now, that may not seem crazy because we're used to everything being more expensive in Illinois, but Illinois also has the most farmland of the Midwest. And any state that has that kind of farmland, our groceries naturally are lower. And so even though we have that massive advantage of all this farmland, even with that, we have the most expensive groceries in the entire Midwest. This is our problem right now, is that that's what the people outside this room are thinking about on a Saturday. They're not thinking about property tax policy. They're not thinking about immigration policy. They're thinking about how they can't afford to survive. And that's where we've got to meet them where their needs are. Any other takeaways for you on either 91 or any other key races you might have been watching in Illinois?
No, but makeup is very expensive. That is it.
Every time when my wife goes to the store and I see like the bill, I'm like, what made it 3 times what we usually pay for household items? Well, I had to get makeup. I was like, sheesh.
You did mention candidate recruitment, and I want to talk about how Democrats have done a great job of they don't start recruiting a candidate when they think a seat's going to become open. They start recruiting a candidate as soon as the seat is filled. They lay the groundwork. They are getting that person out that they think is going to run next, whether it's 5, 10 years from now. They're having them out there in the community, getting their name out there and meeting all the big donors. That way when they do announce, their name is out there and they can call, they can go through their phone list and be like, hey, I'm running. I need you to donate $1,000 or $500. That's what they've been doing, and we have not been doing it. It's like, oh gosh, somebody's retiring? I guess we better find a candidate now.
The number of times my phone rings where it's like, hey, filing deadline is in 2 weeks. Do you have somebody in district whatever? I'm like, in 2 weeks? What do you expect me to do in 2 weeks?
And the entire time that you're out there doing that, they're learning the people, they're getting to know, and then they become a friend. I don't know how many times we would be at the door, we'd be talking to a Republican, and they'd be like, yeah, but I know Jared, he's my friend. It's like, well, I get that, but that's right there. That's the emotional appeal. They're like, logically, I agree with Brandun on everything, but that's my friend. I like him. We have to do a better job of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to that point, let's talk about, we're going to skip something and go right to candidate recruitment at the local level. I don't have to tell you all this, but guess what? We're not done with the election. Now, everyone in this room gets this, but poor Michael and our team, not only were trying to get our November candidates elected, they were also passing petitions because during the exact same time period, we were having to pass petitions for the February and April elections, which are coming up. And so, as was pointed out, where we're going to define these candidates for state rep, for state senate down the line, we're going to find them as local mayors. We're going to find them as members of a school board. We're going to find them on a library board or a township position. That's where you're going to find a lot of these candidates. And the Democrats have made it clear that they're done playing ball with this. There used to be a detente that the parties would just sort of stay out of the local elections. And so Republicans have been kind of following that, even though Democrats broke that a long time ago. They have been putting out, I kid you not, press releases. They're publicly telling us what they're going to do. They're going to spend significant money and significant time on local elections. That was their press release right after Election Day was, we're coming for your local school boards. We're coming for your local municipalities. We're going to elect Democrats at the local level. We don't care if they're nonpartisan. We got to stop playing patty cake as Republicans because it's war out there and the Democrats have already fired the first 15 shots. And so the elections are coming up. We are not done. You can take your vacation in April if you want. But April 1st is that local election day. We've got to go find candidates at the local level. So that's going to be our topic. We're going to let Michael kick us off since he's been wanting to talk. At the local level, what can we do to find good candidates and make sure those good, rock-solid conservatives get elected at the local level?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be looking, in those community and civic organizations like in your county, and they identify those leaders. Maybe they're a small business owner, or they're heavily involved in their church or Rotary, organizations like that. That's where you're going to find those candidates for those municipal elections, and they're going to have, they're going to start off on strong footing with those connections that they've built, through their involvement in those organizations. And that's where everything starts. I mean, Monday is the deadline to turn in petitions?
Depending on
which type of race you're in, so, I mean, April 1st, April Fool's Day, that's election day for these municipal elections. And vote by mail ballots get sent out on January 16th, right? So the timeline is right upon us. We're going to be right in the thick of it. We already are, but it's going to get even crazier. But that's where get somebody elected to school board or trustee or village mayor, and then maybe the next cycle they run for county board or county clerk or one of those offices. I mean, that's how we get our foot in the door, get people experience. That way, whenever they run for those bigger offices, like maybe even state rep or state senate, that they have a resume that the voters can look at and say, okay, this person can do this job.
Well, what we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years is voters across the country are willing to vote for candidates, regardless of party, that know how to lead. Voters are looking for leaders right now, and I've always thought that the path back to relevancy for Republicans in this state is frankly through some of those local offices. We've proven that we know how to lead at the local level. We've proven whether it's a county sheriff or a local mayor or a school board member, it's Republicans at the local level who are leading. And then you can trust us now to lead from the governor's mansion or the attorney general's position or whatever else it is we're looking down the line. And that's it again, start with these local races. And here's the great thing. As we look at the data, Voters in many of these blue counties or blue townships vote Democrat at the top of the ticket. They vote Democrat even for state office. And yet in many of these places, they're voting for fiscally responsible Republicans at the township and the local level. It drives me crazy. I don't understand it. But they're voting for fiscal responsibility. They're voting for conservatives. They're voting for Republicans at the local level, even while they vote 70-30 Democrat at the hierarchy. And so there's a tremendous opportunity for us as Republicans, as conservatives, to get good people in those local offices. When there's 10%, 15% voter turnout, you go get 50 people, 100 people to the polls, you might flip an entire election with that many people. We can make a massive difference between now and April 1st. So please, reschedule that family vacation for April 2nd, because this is the future of our state, the future of our party is on the ballot the next 5.5 months. Who else has thoughts?
I can speak to that. Number one, my vacation starts April 4th.
There we go.
And no, I see it as, yes, the data does read that way. I really have been focused on getting more of the young people involved. Yeah. And not only am I familiar with the young people in this area, Tazewell County specifically, just in what I do, but you can find these specific groups of them in the churches. You're going to find these conservative young people. And they have a voice, and they just need it opened up a little bit. You need to provide them that opportunity to speak to something, and that's what we've been working on in this area, is to get a group like that going. And we have it up and running, and some young men have taken the lead, and it should be up and running in the spring.
Nice.
That's all I'm going to say about it for now.
That's exciting. I want to talk school board races. I'm going to go over to you because I know it's with your history, it's a...
And I am a school board member.
There we go. So one of the things that we've seen nationwide and even in Illinois is this movement the last 2 or 3 years towards parents' rights and local control. Regardless of whether you consider yourself a conservative or a liberal, you want control over your kids' education. Regardless of your political positions in Illinois, you don't trust Springfield and you don't want them making decisions for your children. And so what we've seen is that regardless of your party or political persuasion, local control, parent control play really well, and those are conservative/Republican positions. And so we've got tremendous opportunities in the local school boards. It really needs to be a bigger focus than, frankly, it has been.
Well, it has to be a bigger focus, because if we want to actually effectuate change in the schools, you have to get a majority of people that you want elected to the school board. It's a body of 7. So I might be a conservative on my local school board, but if I'm only one, I'm not doing anything. I could have my dissent. I'm lucky to serve on a great school board, I should say. But we have to be getting 4, 5, 6, 7 people elected to the school. Now, you can't do that all at once. But yeah, no, we definitely need to be doing that. And we need to be making school choice more of our Republican platform here in the state, in Illinois. Because if you go to minority communities, you know what they really want? School choice. Because where are they likely living? In areas where the public schools are terrible. And they want their kids out of there because they want their kids to have the American dream.
Well, I mean, it's Telwood. Anybody know the name Stacey Davis Gates?
I have some thoughts.
If you knew the name, the boos would be louder. Here's how you need to know her. She's the head of the Chicago Teachers Union. Now do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you going to steal my line?
Maybe. Go ahead.
Who sends her kids to private school?
Yeah. So fights against school choice and yet sends her own kids to private school. Just like
private school, by the way.
Just like J.B. Pritzker and all the other hypocritical Democrats who want to set rules for you while they do whatever the heck they want to do.
And what makes it worse is that she once said that you are racist if you send your kids to private school. Meanwhile, the Invest in Kids Act, which only helped low-income and working-class families, was majority minority students. So we had about 15,000 kids on our scholarships, and the majority of them were minorities. And if you go up into Chicago, it was close to 70-80% of the students on our scholarships were minority students. So they're trying to escape failing public schools.
They killed that, but send their own kids to private school. These are the kind of things, shameless plug, these are the kind of things we let you know on our podcast so that you can go tell your friends, which is why you should watch every week. Okay, that's just one plug at friends. But this is the kind of thing that happens over and over. And as Republicans, we can win in a state if we have this information and we let people know about it, because the eye rolls signals are huge from Democrats or Republicans when they're told what's being done by the leadership of this state. The leaders of the Democratic Party in this state are not those moderates, those working class types that the voters are. They are far left progressives who are pushing their ridiculous far left agenda on this state, but the voters don't know about it. When you let the voters know, they go, oh, maybe there's an alternative. And then you say, hey, I got this candidate, Desi Anderson, Brandun, Schweizer, Schmidt. That's how we get in that door to let them know that there's a better alternative. But you got to let them know what's happening because the media ain't going to do that. They're not going to do our done for us because they're in the pocket of the other side. So we've got to be the ones putting that information out there. Any other thoughts on local elections?
I mean, truly, all politics are local. You know, that's where it all starts. We're losing that ability right there. You know, like Collin said, we go on vacation the day after elections and they double down on their staff on the left. So I do. I think that if we can provide more cover and concealment for good people to be out there with that infrastructure, I think it becomes very easy for good people to step up and do good things. So.
All right, we had you all submit your questions. We had some great ones. We had some suggestions about potential candidates for governor in the future.
Jane Jordan for governor.
We also got some great questions. So at the time we have left, we're going to go through the questions that we got. We won't get to all of them, but certainly after the podcast, I'm sure we'll all be happy to talk with anybody hanging around here to catch you up on maybe some of your questions we weren't able to get to. This one was just, I could do this quick before we go to the next one. Explain how we were just saved from packing the court and executive orders for the Democrats. I mean, I posted a meme right after Trump had won and we took the Senate, and it was people doing this, hitting the button, and I said, these are the Republican senators confirming Trump's 30-year-old conservative nominees to the courts. I mean, it was, the Democrats said they were going to bust the filibuster if they took the Senate. They would have reshaped the Senate in this country forever if the Democrats had won in November. Truly, democracy was actually on the ballot, just not the way Democrats wanted to be. And democracy was saved by not giving Democrats control of the Senate specifically. Regardless of your feelings towards the White House, they were going to reshape American government if they had the Senate. So that was a big deal that happened in November. Let me go to a question, though. So how do we make it known that JB is not representing us? Especially specifically the issue of the legals. So if you haven't heard, if you didn't watch our podcast this week, J.D. Pritzker has come out and said, you're going to want to come for my people, you got to come through me, which, first of all, there's some good jokes there for anyone who'd like to jump on. But I'll be good and I won't touch it. It's too easy. That said, this is J.D. Pritzker saying, hey, guess what? I picked this small group over here. Not the majority of Illinoisans, by the way, just this small group that I favor. And I'm going to protect them from, D.C. and the White House. Well, our new border czar took that as a challenge and said, challenge accepted, and said, okay, sure, let's do it. You think you can beat me, we'll go to war. Here's the thing now. This is going to be a fight, it's going to be a war, and I don't think, and I'll ask you guys what you think, that that's in the best interest of Illinois. You're going to see our governor at war with D.C., and this is going to happen for at least 2, if not 4 years, I mean, if we could get rid of J.B. Pritzker. And so the question is, what's going to happen and what do we do about it? How do we hold J.B. responsible and let the world know, let alone the people in this state, that we don't agree that spending over $1 billion on non-citizens while our veterans are sleeping on the streets is a good idea? The position, the voters are with us on this, that we're going to have to fight, and we're going to have to let them know where things stand. So curious what you guys think on immigration and this big fight between JV and Washington, D.C. What are your thoughts? I know Michael has thoughts.
I mean, you look at the numbers, we spent $1.2 billion in the state of Illinois over the last year on people that are not citizens of this country. When you look at, the housing, the health care, the food cards, all of these items. So really, at the end of the day, I think that Pritzker should be sending a thank you note to the Trump administration for sending these people that are here illegally back to the country that they came from. This is going to save us a lot of money, and it'll go a long way in addressing the budget issues that are facing us, in the next couple of years. So I think Pritzker's making a fool of himself, and he's auditioning to be president of the United States. That's very clear. But I don't think he's going to accomplish that. I don't even think we'll get through a Democratic primary, let alone win the presidency. But let him waste his time. At least his energy's focused elsewhere, not focused on ruining the state anymore.
Yeah. I think it's also short-sighted of him because you can't talk about the immigration crisis without it actually bringing up all the negative effects that the media has been trying so desperately not to talk about. So if he's going to bring it to the forefront, he's bringing up everything. And I think that's only going to help the Republican Party grow in Chicago. I mean, we saw, 3 wards turn red this past election. And so, especially, the Hispanic vote, a lot of it was due to the fact that they don't agree with open borders because so many of them came in and followed the law and want other people to do the same because it's actually quite hard.
Well, the 2022 and 2023 elections showed record low black turnout. We don't know yet for 24 because you don't have that data yet. But one of the key reasons was that they were incredibly frustrated. They've been begging Democrats, especially, to bring more money into their communities, and they keep being told, no, there's no more money. And then you see a bunch of migrants come in and some illegals, the Democrats suddenly find over $1 billion. And so you've seen black voters go, wait a second, maybe Democrats aren't actually representing my best interest. Now, the problem is they're just staying home. They're not coming to vote for us because we're not going to talk to them. But step 1 is them being willing to not vote for Democrats. Step 2 is us going and actually winning their votes. But it's especially because of all the money that's been spent on non-citizens instead of being spent on Illinois citizens.
Yep. And that's I think it's, like I said, it's short-sighted. It's going to come up even more. And then it makes it even easier for us to actually go into it and go into those communities and point to it. Be like, look, they gave your neighbor, not your neighbor, but these people all these cards. Well, you can't even afford to buy groceries.
Well, it was brought up about J.B. Pritzker, so I want to go to this next question because I'm sure we'll all have a little fun with this one. How do we get a Republican governor? How do we defeat J.B. Pritzker or whoever might be the candidate? How do we do that? I think it's a great discussion point for all of us, especially in light of the fact that J.B. Pritzker and the Democrats have been gaslighting the people of the state. While those of us up here have been saying that the budget isn't balanced, that the money isn't there, that we do have a serious financial problem, we were called doom grifters and carnival barkers and all sorts of names by Pritzker and his allies in the media when we were simply telling the truth. And now suddenly Pritzker's own GOMB had to admit, they waited until the Friday before Election Day, mind you, but they had to finally admit that next year's budget is over $3 billion out of whack. That's before the transit crisis and how they're asking for $1 billion, and Chicago's asking for $1 billion. It's more than just 3. And the year after that, it's over 4. The year after that, it's over $5 billion. We are facing and about to go over a massive fiscal cliff in this state. And as a result, I think J.B. Pritzker eventually. I'm out. I'm done. I'm not dealing with this. Either way, though, how do we win the governor's mansion in 2026? And I'll start on this side since they got to talk about the last one. So go last one.
Okay. I think he's just pointing out the hypocrisy. It's right there. The problem with socialism is that the bill always comes due. And it's coming due. And JB, if he has any kind of ambition, which, it's on the wall, of course he's got to get out of Dodge before that comes due. Otherwise, that's going to hang on him. And guess what? He can't win outside of Illinois. So I think that's the first thing is we have to get simpler with our message. We've got to get that out there. But I think winning 2026 starts in the spring of 25. That's the infrastructure that's going to provide the ability to turn the governor's mansion from blue to red. We had Rauner for a term that, we haven't been consistently making a play there for quite some time. So I think the way to do that is just to tether that. Brandun Johnson lost the vote up in Chicago 50-0. They've never seen that over anything. I think that enough voters, Democrats and Republicans, are starting to see the writing on the wall. So if we as Republicans, the conservative side of things, can convey these messages, the data is there. And so...
Go thoughts, or we'll pass it over here. You guys have thoughts? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we touched on it briefly earlier. There were 2.4 million people that voted in this last November election for President Trump, right? And if we can identify those people and make sure that they get out in the 2026 election, that's going to pay dividends, and it's going to bring a lot of our Republicans, maybe statewide, especially, state rep and some of these more local races across the finish line. So each of us need to be looking, once we get the final results from the election, look at your precinct and see, okay, who are people that showed up in 2024 to vote President Trump but did not cast a ballot in 2022 when J.B. Pritzker ran for re-election. We need to be reaching out to those people and saying, hey, you got to make sure you have a plan to vote in 2026. This is an important election, and we need to take our state back.
Yeah.
I think another part of this too, we've got Ron Belford here who talked to me just before we started about the need for us to be able to work together. You know, one of the problems is we tend to swing the pendulum too far either way. If you watch our podcast, you know that I'm probably one of the biggest cheerleaders you have statewide who cheers on our party, but that doesn't mean I don't point out when we could do things better, when there's improvements to be made. But that said, I do it in a collaborative, constructive way. There are those out there who just want to rip down our party because they don't like Rhonda Belford, they don't like Kathy Chelsie, so they're going to rip on them and attack them, and we can't have it. Do you want to be constructive and say, hey, you did X, X doesn't work, you should do Y instead. Okay, now come on my podcast, we'll talk about it. We want to get better. Chelsie said it. Let's get better. But if you just want to say, hey, I don't like so-and-so, so I'm going to do put out in a blog or a newspaper article that I hate Kathy Chelsie or that Rhonda Belford's a horrible human. I mean, who can say that about Rhonda? Come on. She's maybe the second nicest person in this room behind Michael Butler. I mean, Carnation. So we've got to get to that point where, yes, we need to be constructive. There were mistakes that were made in this last election. We must get smarter. We must get better. But we can do it working together. I'm going to give you an example. I did a training just a couple months ago in a different state. I don't want to call them out on this. Where they had a lot of infighting too. And what they did is we had a big training, and they actually had two sides of the room, one for each of their groups, because they hated each other. But at the very beginning, the leader of each group stood up and said, listen, we don't like each other, we all know it, but we need to get better, we need to learn, we're all conservative, so we need to learn and win. So for today, we like each other. After this, maybe we won't work together too much, but in this room, we've got to get better so we can win. You would never see that happen in Illinois, where they come in the same room and say, listen, we have our differences, but let's figure out a way we can go out and win as Republicans, as conservatives. It's not to say we're always going to agree, but it's to say that we're all on the same dang team. And so, yes, we're going to have disagreements and personality conflicts. There's plenty of people out there who don't like me, and that's fine, because I don't like people, so it's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, we still are on the same team. And so it's not necessarily this unify at all costs. It's not really my position as everyone just kumbaya all the time. No, we got to get better. We got to find ways to get better. But at the end of the day, we're on the same team. We're going to win the governor's mansion. That's what we got to lose. Any other final thoughts on how we're going to win the governor's mansion, how we're going to win in 2026?
This might get me in trouble, but
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm personally tired of hearing the term rhino. We have this infighting, and in our state, we have, I like to say 5 states. We have Chicago, 4, sorry, I miscounted. We have Chicago, Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, and Southern Illinois. You're going to have different types of Republicans. I talked earlier about how I'm from Winnebago County. I am definitely more conservative now living in Central Illinois than I was growing up when I lived in Northern Illinois, and I'm now more conservative than my family that still lives up there. We have to be a big tent party, because if we're constantly fighting each other, we're not going to win, and I really like winning. I don't care if somebody might disagree with me on tax policy or anything like that, but if I agree with them 50% of the time, 55% of the time, and compared to somebody I agree with 0% of the time, I'm going to take that. I'll have God take them if I agree with them 15% of the time over 0% of the time. We have to start realizing that there's going to be different types of Republicans for different areas. Okay, Brandun Schweizer, where his district is actually very, very moderate. So he cannot be a Freedom Caucus guy, because then he's not representing that district. And if he wants to win, if we still want a conservative voice in that district, we have to keep him. And I'm telling you, I'm probably one of the most conservative people you'll ever meet, okay? But what we have to realize is if we actually want to start winning, we have to come together. And it's only when you're winning that you can then start having the dang purity test that we all want to have when we're losing.
Well, I take a lot of flack because whether it's in my politics or on our podcast, we've defended, you mentioned the Freedom Caucus. Up by me in Northern Illinois, it's like a swear word to say Freedom Caucus. They're the Eastern Bloc, they're so horrible. They're a key part of our party, and I've defended them and taken a lot of grief out in my part of the state. Then I come into a training in Southern Illinois, and I get grief because I'm a Cook County Republican, and I'm supporting. So, okay, guys, but I'm practicing what I preach. We're all the same party. Yes, we may disagree on a few policies here and there, but guess what? I'm one of the few people who's gotten a pro-life candidate elected in a deep blue district. So don't come at me. I'm going to get the most conservative candidate possible elected in those districts. But we got to recognize that we're all on the same team. And when it comes to elections, this is the most diverse state in the whole country. So somebody from Carbondale may not agree with somebody from Rockford, and that's okay.
I do have a comment that I'm feeling a little sassy about. So when Chelsie mentioned the winning, which we would all like to win more of the races, and during veto session this week, they just voted in the same leadership. Can we talk a little bit about that? And is there a way to win in the next cycle with the same leadership?
Yeah, so I'll just take it, because if you've watched our podcast, you may know I've taken a little grief, because I did say we needed some improvements. And we're here to talk constructively and positively. So I'm going to take the positive side of this. Feel free to go back to the last 2 and 3 episodes if you want to hear my 10-minute rant about this, because I did go on a rant. We shouldn't be declaring victory because we didn't lose seats. This is the only thing that I'll say on this, is there was a bit of a movement here to say, hey, look, election day was great for us because we didn't lose seats. And like Chelsie, my family doesn't play board games with me because I like to win. I imagine probably it's similar in your household, but I
can't even let my 4-year-old twins win.
Yeah. So this idea that we're going to declare victory because we didn't lose, I don't love that. If we're ever going to have a say, yes, we have challenges. Redistricting is a challenge. But guess what? If we want to change the maps, we've got to be out of the superminority. We have to hold the governor's office, and we have to be out of the superminority by 2030. And then even then, we only have a 50% chance at drawing the maps. And so we have to make progress. So when you say in 2024, when Trump did 9 points better, that, oh, it's so great that we didn't lose any seats, we need to pick up some seats. We've got some ways available. And so with respect to the current leadership who is now going to continue for the next 2 years, what I said in our last podcast is, okay, the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans have made their choices. They want the Comey and Curran to continue to be their leaders. I respect that. They get to make that choice. But we need to make sure that our mentality as a party isn't, I'm going to use the phrase, isn't this loser mentality of, ooh, yay, Democrats gave us some crumbs. Ooh, yay, we didn't lose any seats. We need to go out there and say we're going to win. We're going to pick up seats. We're going to take the governor's mansion. We're going to flip this state instead of being happy that maybe we didn't lose this year. And so that's all I'll say in this, so I don't hurt the room too much, because I know we're all together here in the same party. Ultimately, let's set our expectations higher. Let's hold each other accountable. And let's go out there and let's win some seats, because you know what? We're right on policy. We've got hardworking candidates. We've got great candidates that we've recruited. We owe it to them to go out there and win some seats. Yeah. All right, so as always with these podcasts, we like to close down and let everybody talk about what they want to talk about. Anything because I may have chosen what we talk about here, but I may have missed some. So we'll let each of you guys cover whatever you want as we close this down. Let's go this direction since we started this direction. So just to drive them crazy as they cast the mic back, I like to cuss for hours.
No, and that's where we're at right now in Illinois is there's some chaos. But where I come from with my background, where there's chaos, there's an opportunity for control. The people who I'm looking at, I know some of you personally. I'd worked with some of you up in Milwaukee. I got to know some of you very well. There's a lot of hope. There really is in this state for the first time in a very long time. I watch you guys on a weekly basis. The conversation is there to be had. Are you bold enough to have that conversation? Because that's one of the biggest things I saw is that you got Trump supporters who won't put Trump signs in their yard because they're afraid of what the left might say to them. Well, the mandate was here nationwide. You know, I'm a God-fearing man, maybe not the best Christian out there, but I feel that God really gave us grace with this instead of a judgment. What are we doing with that? If we are the party of principle, if we are that conservative group, we need to convey why people need to slow down. You know, we talked about kowtowing to these special groups, you know, the super minorities, you know. The Republicans, we don't want to excommunicate all of these people. We just don't want to pay for all of this stuff. How do we convey these messages to people? And that's that connection. That's really what it comes down to. I'm looking at Rhonda Belfort. I got to know her and her husband up in Milwaukee. These are the type of people that need to be out there fighting for us. These are the type of people like you that go to your neighbor and say, hey, what do you believe? What do you think? have that better enhanced conversation. That's where we're going to get better people for the local races. Local candidates make better statewide. Statewide gives us what we need, and that's how we take the state back by 2030. I don't think that we should be considering we can take the state by 2030. We need bold leadership. We need people to step up who haven't stepped up before and say the things you're thinking. Just say them the right way, because we are the party that does listen to other people. Don't forget that. Outside of that, let's go. I mean, it's that time. We should be excited. We should be pumped up. It is time to go and change our state for the better. So thank you for having me up here. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Diane, who is one of my favorite people, and I am so excited she's getting even more active and visible. And thank you, Lana, for always making her do more than she's really good at. We always call Lana and say, hey, do you want to come on? She's like, Diane will do it. Your final thoughts for today.
Oh gosh, I'm grateful to be on. I really am. I wasn't planning on it because this seat was supposed to be filled with someone. So I'm really, though, very glad to have all you ladies here representing, because there's all ages of us here, and we have a lot to give. We have strong voices, and we are fierce, and we are outspoken. And I want us all to remember that, because we can make a difference in Illinois' Republican Party, in our local Republican parties, and that's what we've all stepped up to do. And I plan to keep going with it all. So thank you all for being here, ladies. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate Collin being here with his show.
What can you final thought?
Yeah, I was here last year with you guys as well. It was a great time. Obviously, one of the messages that I gave last time was that, each of us individually are ambassadors for our values and for the Republican Party in the state. And, the Democrats are always going to outspend us, 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. There's no telling how much money they're going to have, but we know it's going to be more than what we have to spend. But us as Republicans, we have each other. And that's important to remember. And when you're out, like I said last year, beauty shop, barber shop, coffee shop, you've got to be looking for those opportunities to talk to people in your communities about the values that we hold as Republicans, what our policies are, what we would do if you're running for an office, what you would do if you got elected, or what your state rep candidate, your state senate candidate, our governor candidate 2 years from now, what they're going to do if they get into office. I had two great conversations over the course of the last, probably 10 days. One at the gas station with the guy that was working the register, and then one with my barber, and there was 3 other people waiting, the guy to hear about how great Republicans are. So you just got to look for those opportunities, take advantage of it, because those conversations, one at a time, they add up, they make a difference.
Absolutely.
Well, I thought Michael's hair was looking on point. So I always tell my kids, you might not be the smartest ones in the room. In fact, I can probably guarantee that. But you can be...
Hopefully they're not watching.
They have half my genes. I really screwed them over. But I tell them that they can be the hardest working. So what do we have to be here in Illinois? Is we have to be the hardest working. How did we keep that seat? Well, we knocked on 36,000 doors. Okay? All of our local county and township groups, we have to be getting more people to help us. I'm a local PC. How many of you guys are PCs? Woo, look at that. So you guys are doing, how many of you here are like, what is a PC? We have to be going out there and doing that direct voter contact, trying to get people to talk to us and making them our friends. We have to outwork the Democrats. And here's the thing, guys. Democrats have literally written books on how they win elections. We just have to start doing it on our side. And I think that we have the momentum now to really make the most of that. People that would have probably slammed the door in your face prior to this election, they might be willing to keep that door open to have that talk with you. So we just have to outwork them, and I think we can do that because we are the salt of the earth people. We're not like Democrats. The joke down in Decatur is that Sue Scheer keeps winning her races because the unions will keep sending people go out and knock doors with her. We don't have that option, although the membership of the unions are now turning more Republican. but we have to be the ones that are going to go out there and actually make the change. So I know if you guys are like me, you like to volunteer people to go do something, go ahead and volunteer some people to go out there and start knocking doors with you.
Let me I want to close with this, a tale of two regions, Texas versus DuPage County. About 6 years ago, we saw a similar thing happen. 6, 8, 10 years ago, we saw a similar thing happening in Texas as we've been seeing happen in DuPage County up by us, which was deep ruby red. What happened was, in these areas, Republicans never had to work to win. They never had to be tactically smart to win. They just had to put their name on the ballot with an R, and they won. It was great. And then Democrats started making inroads. What Texas did after they realized this is bad, we're in trouble, is they went and they put on a massive effort. I spent a ton of time in Texas the last 6 years. They did almost 1,000 trainings throughout Texas. From the highest levels to the lowest levels, they required their people to come out and be trained. And even though every time we hear, oh, is this the year Texas goes blue? Yet again, Texas was double digits Republican yet again because they recognized we need to get better, we need to get tactically smarter, and they did something about it. DuPage County, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I got to be honest, DuPage County had the same problem. They were the vote-rich area for Republicans in the suburbs for the longest time. And so once Democrats started coming in, they didn't know what to do about it because they never had to fight to win. But instead of doing the same thing that we saw in Texas, they didn't get. There are some pockets with respect, but overall they didn't do the same thing Texas did where they said, let's get better, let's get smarter, let's get tactically better so we can go win. When I do trainings around the country, people are pushing each other over to come out, conservatives, Republicans, to learn to get better. When we try to do trainings in Illinois, every 2 years or so, I'm dumb enough to try. I pay for it out of my own pocket, and you know what happens first? I can't even get it on the calendar because different conservative groups or Republican groups are infighting and they want credit or they don't like this group or they don't like that group. If I finally do get it on the calendar, then it's hard to get them to actually do any work to promote it. And then once we get to that day, it's almost impossible to get people to come out. We are not, in this state, ready and willing to grow, to learn, to get tactically smarter. And right now, we're losing to Democrats who are awful. In this post-Madigan era, whether it's Chris Welch, Don Harmon, J.B. Pritzker, or the state party, Democrats in this state are actually not very smart.
And they're lazy.
And they're pretty lazy, to be honest. We can beat them. That's what drives me crazy. I don't mind losing to somebody smarter and better than me, but losing to the other side when they're not actually very smart politically, we can beat them, but we need to admit that we're not great at messaging, we're not great at communications. Tactically, we need to get smarter and go out and learn. There are resources available to you, but we need to take them because right now, the other side's vulnerable, but we're not ready yet. We're not in the position yet where we could beat them, but we could get there if we go out there and get better, get smarter. So please, use resources like this conference. Please subscribe to our podcast. We're above YouTube and Spotify. I'm going to try to see if we can pull together another group of trainings and maybe let's actually get those out there and get people to show up and learn and grow because we can win. We can beat them. I feel wholeheartedly I know that we can win. Otherwise, I'd be in another state. My company's nationwide now. My wife would love if we would move somewhere that's warmer. If I didn't really know I was winnable, I would have been gone a long time ago because I make a lot more money on the other 49 states than I make on this stupid state. But I'm here. I want to win it. So let's go out and let's go win. What do you think? With that, we'll say thank you for your time and pass it back to whatever's next on the agenda. Thank you, everybody.